So as we pick up, where we left off, the African-centered, the African personality, the African personality in America, an African-centered framework. And there's the author, Kobe Kumbum. We're still in the preface. Still in the preface. This book asserts that there is indeed an African reality system that is not only indigenous to Africans in America, but that most of us are almost totally unaware of it and how it determines our very lives. It further asserts that this African reality system is superior, in fact, optimal for African people to the European American reality system, to which we are forced to assimilate and internalize through the American society institutional arrangement. That's heavy. That's heavy. I'll read that again. This book asserts that there is indeed an African reality system. So this is what we'll be studying. The main thrust of this book, I believe. African reality system that is not only indigenous to Africans in America, but that most of us are almost totally unaware of our African reality system and how it determines our very lives. Ergo, the insanity that most of us are producing in our lives, in our communities. Did I just yawn? Yes, I did. It further asserts that this African reality system is superior for African people, optimal, to the European American reality system, to which we are forced to assimilate and internalize through the American societal institutional arrangement in order to enjoy whatever the rewards American life are supposed to offer: psychological, social, material rewards, etc. That's heavy. So basically, we're forced to assimilate because in our beingness, we have within us, in everyone's personality, we have those innate wants to be validated, okay, by someone, by a group. It's human nature, and innate to want to be accepted, to want to be rewarded, but it's based on, we're forced to assimilate into their consciousness, their reality. It's not ours. Okay, and if you know the history of this country, you know why we're forced to, because of oppression, and we're treated as second-class citizens, third-class citizens, objects, if you will. And if you really know the history, not even considered humans, again, objects. So here we are. Yeah. So we're forced to assimilate and internalize through the American societal institutional arrangement in order to enjoy, So just to enjoy life, we're forced to squeeze into this round peg, to squeeze into this square peg, this square. We can't, but we're trying to make it. We're trying to make it. It thus argues, his book, that optimal African functioning lies outside of the alleged superior optimal quality of European reality, i.e., the false assertion of European reality as universal and of African reality as primitive and inferior. Let me read that again. It thus argues that optimal African functioning lies outside, not tied with, outside of the alleged superior optimal quality of European reality, um, i.e., the false assertion of European reality as universal and of African reality as primitive and inferior. Because they've preached that our reality is primitive and inferior, so therefore we must adopt the European reality that is universal for everybody, not only Europeans and European Americans, but for everybody. They really feel like their reality is above everyone, you know, everywhere. Japanese, Chinese, uh, Hindus, everywhere across this planet, every continent, they feel like theirs reality is the optimal. Mm, that's that's sad. That's sick. It's insane. Um, and then for others to suppress theirs, their reality. But as we read earlier, there's a mass movement of African thinkers that are retaking the podium of human, of knowledge of the human experience. Retaking. Okay. Our our consciousness is not inferior. It's indigenous to us. We're proud of that. You know, and not only are we proud of that, but we are a benefit to the world in every way. Okay. And number two, the model presented in this book also asserts that the average African in America, operates slash functions in a mentally disordered state on a daily basis, engendered engendered by white supremacy domination over our African cultural reality here in America. That's heavy because we're operating out because we're operating in an alien consciousness. It automatically, anybody that knows psychology, anybody that deals with um, yeah, this is just say psychology, but you know, abuse or trauma, um, knows how this works. When you're trying to function, if you're trying to have a so-called normal life in a dysfunctional state, it's not going to work. You're going to be scarred. So that's deep, though, for him to say that the model presented in this book also asserts that the average African in America operates functions in a mentally disordered state on a daily basis, engendered by white supremacy domination over our African cultural reality here in America. You know, I just can't stress that enough. You know, when you're forced to operate, live, not being who you truly are, you know, you you operate in a mentally disordered state because you're not who you are. You know, you it's almost like um, Frankenstein. You know, because you're not allowed to operate in your normal state. You're not even. Some of us, again, like he said, don't even know our African reality. I like to call it Negroism. You know, Negroism is what the massa, MASSA, Massanim, NEM created. You know, um, and a lot of our brothers and sisters operate like that. They live like that. They live by the will of Massanim that's been injected into their consciousness. You know, don't even know that they have a will or a consciousness outside of that. Um, my book is um, gotta find my book by Dr. Baba Wilson. He breaks it down even further on that point. Let me get it. Hold on 1 second. It is downstairs in my man hub. I'll have to find it later, but this is in my bag here. But Baba Amos Wilson talks about the consciousness of us here in this diaspora and how our consciousness was our historical, how do you put it? Our individual and collective consciousness has been basically, I'm paraphrasing and adding my own words to the great psychologist who is now our ancestor, but was seared, supplanted, very similar to what this psychologist, Baba Cambolan, is talking about. And Dr. Wilson goes on to say that because our consciousness has been seared, it has hindered us from benefiting from what could be assets to us in our here and now. Information passed from our ancestors to us that should have been passed to us from our ancestors, but because our consciousness have been seared, cut off, we can't retrieve that information. So therefore, we're dealing with a created consciousness, and even in that consciousness, it's alienated to us. So that's jacked up. That's jacked up. You know, it's almost like, my analogies can be a little goofy sometimes, but it's almost like a Honda Accord, with a Honda Accord car with a 4x4 truck tires. It's just not going to work. So that's how, and going back to the book, that's what he said, the model presented in his book, he's going to show us. Again, I'm just reading the intro to his book, that the average African in America operates mentally disordered state. Okay, that is because we are forced through white supremacy, miseducation, and indoctrination to function. Okay, this is because we are forced through white supremacy, miseducation, and indoctrination to function psychologically, behaviorally, etc., as a European person in black skin. So, such a condition then is literally one of mental disorder unique to Africans, which the American European controlled societal system itself supports and reinforces in African people. I was thinking about this, that when we see entertainers and their great talent, no matter how great it is, um, singing, acting, dancing, and this is heavy what I'm about to say, but I believe it. I know this to be true. Just what's in my spirit and what the ancestors, well, obviously what the ancestors imparted into me, that a lot of that, I'm not gonna say is in vain, but was because the talent is definitely our talent. It's the melanin that we have gives us the ability to do what we do, but it was birthed through oppression and birth through what they wanted us to do, um, reinforced us to do, to bring entertainment, entertainment, if you will. Okay, that's deep. That's deep. Um, because again, we're operating in this, under this oppression, under this consciousness, and we made the best of it, you know. But is it really what we were created to do, to entertain them in that way, you know, to use our um, talent, our energy, our resources to promote, continue to promote their consciousness? And that's basically what we've been doing. And you can look at the number of stars, so-called stars, entertainers, that have perished due to being stuck in this insanity, entertaining us, and lives have turned out horribly, horrible, because of them being dysfunctional. No, I mean, great talent. I'm not saying they don't have talent. Great voices, could sing, could play ball, but messed up in the head, you know, messed up in the head. And it continues, they continue to reinforce this behavior. And we as Africans in America and abroad continue to co-sign this foolishness. So Dr. Cambone and others, you know, are teaching us we need to step away. You know, we need to segregate. Yep, I said it. We need to segregate and start our own. And some of us are starting to do that in different pockets around the world. We're starting to realize that being on that train has got us nowhere but destruction. You know, it looks good on the outside. It looks like we're in the mainstream of America. They have us on TV and we're, you know, rubbing shoulders with the great producers and other artists from around the world. But we're still in that vein, if you will, promoting this dysfunctional consciousness. And we're alienating ourselves from our natural consciousness, and it's sad. Um, so we have to do something about that. And this is what this book is talking about: building a framework, an African-centered framework from which to operate from. And we can do this. We've done it before, you know. Um, we have to do it through the spirit of love and unity. That's what's going to keep us. And we did it again. We did it before. We're not doing it to be arrogant and, you know, we are the best. We are this or that. The ancestors don't operate like that anyway. So we won't have their piece on what we're trying to bring together if we have that type of mindset. But our mindset is one of, again, being centered and operating from what's indigenous to us, from our indigenous circle, centeredness. Excuse me. So again, point number two of what he's saying. I hope I'm not confusing you. Yeah. Number two is continue. That is because we are forced through white supremacy. I read that, miseducation, and indoctrination to function psychologically, behaviorally, etc., as a European person in black skin. Such a condition, then, is literally one of mental disorder, unique to Africans. We read that. Let me catch up here. Hence, not only is the criminal and homicidal Africans, the societal and drug substance addicted abuse Africans, and the ghetto dwelling school dropout and unskilled and unemployment Africans who suffer from this pervasive form of African personality disorder, but It is also the so-called average Joe Africans, the hardworking, bills-paying, family-oriented, church-going, apple pie eating, etc., or the you and me Africans as well that suffer from this disorder. This mental disorder thus affects the vast majority of our population. Yeah, I said that earlier. Even, we talk about, like he said, the school dropout or the criminal, and we think they're criminals because they're living in this, in this insanity. They don't know themselves, their true African selves. Well, listen, there's cats that are businessmen, that's working in corporate America. They may not be doing what the person on the corner is doing in the neighborhood, but they're still outside of their natural mind as well. What did our great brother say? Malcolm X, you left your mind in Africa, So we got to go back and fetch that, Sankofa that. Okay, point number 3. Finally, the book asserts among things that in order for Africans to escape and heal ourselves from this virtually unbelievable predicament of pervasive mental disorder, we must rebuild our African cultural infrastructure. That's good. Okay. Let's see, we're at 21. All right, I'm going to stop here and I'm going to come back. Okay? All right. BBI Folie, African Liberation.